3 weeks remain in the regular season. The Phil Steele Show is here to help you set the table for Week 11 in college football. At Phil Steele 042 is where you can find the unicorn himself, the man, the myth, the legend, the author of college football's most comprehensive preview magazine. Go to philsteele.com for more information. I'm on X at Kyle Schass, at Tripp Hurd. The Lock Doctor is in the house, setting the table for a Week 11 that features 4 ranked-on-ranked matchups. Again, so many storylines, so many consequential matchups and playoff implications, conference championship implications on the line. And Phil, my good sir, you're on a heater. You continue to win with your power plays each and every week. We'll have those coming up at the end of the show. 11-4 now over the last 5 weeks, Phil. You were giving the audience, the viewers, the listeners, wherever you watch on YouTube or listen wherever you get your podcasts, you aren't letting them down each week. Mizzou might have let you down last week, Phil, but again, you continue to stay hot.
Yeah, doggone Georgia. I had Georgia minus points over Missouri and didn't get the cover, but hopefully we'll have another good week this week.
Now, Phil, I followed you on a couple of picks last week. I know we liked a couple of overs. Bama hit with no problem there. The one pick I had to throw out to go against you was Miami. And, of course, they go up to Raleigh and just get their pants pulled down. Just a terrible performance by the Hurricanes last week. But hopefully a little better luck for me going forward this week.
Hopefully. Let's do it, Tripp.
Well, Tripp and I will have a lot of luck tonight. If you're watching on YouTube via the Varsity Network channel, where you get the video feed of the Phil Steele Show each and every week, you're seeing I'm decked out in Bears gear. I'm a little disappointed Tripp doesn't have any Bears stuff on.
It's
but
blue. It's navy blue.
Okay, it's navy blue, but favored by 3 at home against the lowly Panthers. Of course, we own their rights. Just for giggles, we might ask for a pick on the way out the door. Bears favored by 3. But again, looking to lock up 2 top 5 picks potentially. Even if we lose to the Panthers, we will win, and all is right in the world. 8:15 Amazon Prime. But we'll be watching college football, Phil, as well. To be on double TVs, Southern Miss and Louisiana. Let's start with Virginia and Louisville, Phil, as we get to the Week 11 slate. Still 4 games between now and Saturday. Cavaliers come in being a much more competitive team from what we saw earlier in year 2 under Tony Elliott. 20.5, though, the Cardinals are favored. They've won 10 in a row at home, 7:30 on ESPN. A Louisville win and a UNC loss, Phil, will clinch a spot in the ACC title game against Florida State for the Cardinals. Two-headed monster at running back, too, was revealed last week in their demolition of Virginia Tech. And you like the home team in contests that favor Louisville, I know.
Yeah, absolutely. And just continues to cover 15 in a row for the home team in Louisville games. And, Louisville's been a much more dominant team at home. You look at their home games this year, they're winning by an average of 30 points per game, plus 220 yards per game. You brought up IG or Isaac Guerrero, who had a great game last week. They've got Jawar Jordan, of course, at the running back spot, who's their game breaker. Jack Plummer's having a good year. The offensive line's playing real well. So well, in fact, that Jeff Brom, who likes to throw the football over the field, running the football more this year, and it really shows. I was disappointed in Virginia last week. I thought they had a good shot at beating Georgia Tech, and they got blown out of the water. You look at Tony Muskett getting injured on the 5th play of the game. Maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know if Muskett's going to be able to play here, but bottom line, Louisville on the field, I'm going to take the home team, and I'm going with the home team in Louisville once again. Even though they're laying 20 and a half, I think they could cover this one.
All right, Phil, the other game Thursday night, Southern Miss on the road at Louisiana. After getting humiliated about 3 weeks ago against South Alabama, Southern Miss has covered 2 games in a row. They're coming off a straight-up win over UL Monroe. And tonight, the Eagles are getting 10 on the road at Louisiana. Southern Miss actually leads this series all-time 3-0 over the Cajuns, but I still find it kind of hard to trust Southern Miss right now. Who do you like in this one?
Yeah, one of the keys for them to their resurgence, these last 2 games, I should say, has been Frank Gore Jr. Frank Gore, only had 2 100-yard games prior to the last 2 weeks. He's rushed for 247 and 131 the last 2 weeks, and that's really helped Southern Miss. They covered against App State, and then, as you mentioned, beat ULM last week. Now, when you look at Louisiana, they're coming off a disappointing game against Arkansas State. That was turnover-fueled. Also, Zion Chris got injured. Chris will be out here. They're going to have to go with Chandler Fields. Now, Chandler Fields did start 9 games last year. I don't think he's as dynamic as Zion Chris has been at the quarterback spot, but he's a veteran QB that can come in and do well. They're at home for this one. They beat South Alabama on the road 2 weeks ago by 13. They had big leads against Buffalo, UAB. I just like the way Louisiana's been playing better, and I think the last couple of weeks' results have this line a lot cheaper. I think if this game was played 2 weeks ago, Tripp, that Louisiana is probably a 20-point favorite. And what do you get the current number on this one?
10.
10. So, I mean, we got a lot of value here. I'm going with Louisiana minus the points over Southern Miss. Even though Frank Gore Jr. is playing, there's been a resurgence for Southern Miss. I think the line's pretty cheap here. I like Louisiana.
I think it's even continuing to come down at other places, too. Some books have it around 9.5. So, yeah, being bet down in favor of Southern Miss, who got their first FBS win of the year. Good for Will Hall, and the Golden Eagles are on the road. It just means more for this one as an annual rivalry in the Dallas Metroplex now, as it is a league game, Phil. North Texas visiting SMU. Southern Methodist, 16.5-point favorite. 67.5 is a total. 9 o'clock game on ESPN2. SMU has won 4 straight against UNT, including 35 of 42 meetings overall, so they've dominated all time. Mean Green's Eric Norris, though, has their team UNT playing kind of above their skis, Phil, wouldn't you say, looking at some of the results, some tight finishes here over the last couple of weeks. And how could you forget the one a couple of weeks ago, that wild 24-point comeback? They were down 24-0 in a 45-42 loss against Memphis. Can they cover more than 2 touchdowns, though, on the road at SMU?
Yeah, I like this SMU team this year. They are playing great. You go back and take a look at a couple of their games. Now, last week against Rice, they only won by 5, and it was a sort of a back-and-forth game. Preston Stone did get injured. You wonder if he's going to be able to be 100% here. That would be a question. The other question would be, if you bet SMU, lock your back door, because what we've seen with North Texas, they get down big. They were down 31-10 at the half of Memphis, 21-0 to Tulane, and then they just keep coming back late in the game. I do think SMU's the better team. I personally had the game above 3 touchdowns, so I think the spread's a little cheap there. But if you do play SMU, don't get confident if you're up by 28 points in the third quarter, because North Texas likes to rally. But I got to go against that North Texas defense, which is actually number 133 in the country, allowing teams 98 yards above their season average. If they do that to SMU, which is averaging 468 yards per game, or 465 yards per game, that means SMU gets 563 yards here. I'm going to go with SMU minus the points. Just lock your back door.
All right, the late kick on Friday, 10:45 p.m. Eastern time, Wyoming at UNLV. Look, I've talked about them for a couple weeks now on the show. UNLV's got to have some votes coming in for the Phil Steele Bowl. 8-1 against the spread this year. They're just a shade behind Arizona for the best average cover amount at 11.1. Friday night, Rebs have Wyoming in town. They're favored by 5.5. They're a cover machine, Phil. Do you think they can get it done against the Cowboys?
Yeah, I don't have a strong feeling on this one. I think Wyoming's a pretty good team. Now, Wyoming hasn't played as well on the road this year. You look at their home and away record. But look at who they played on the road. They played Texas, Air Force, and Boise, 3 of the very top teams. Of course, you could say UNLV is one of the top teams. They roll into this one with a 7-2 record. Love the way that Jaden Maeva has taken over for Doug Brumfield at the quarterback spot. They can run the football with a myriad of players. I mean, whether it's Davis, Lester, Thomas, they've been running the ball well. And defensively, it's probably where Wyoming has the advantage here. Wyoming hold opponents to 35 below their season average, UNLV 20 above. I had it around the number, but Tripp, it sounds like you like UNLV for good reasons. I'm going to let you pick this game. And if you pick UNLV, I'm not going to argue with you.
Well, I'm going with UNLV, and I'm pulling for UNLV. I want them to win. I want them to take on JMU in Cleveland, January, whenever.
How about the latest with JMU? They petitioned again, another waiver. They're waiting on some sort of formal review to make them eligible for bowl season now versus waiting to see if 82 teams actually become bowl eligible at the end of the regular season, where they can slide in and take one of those spots. So currently they're still an outside shot, but I don't blame them. They want justice now. They want to know that they can compete in a bowl as it stands today and not have to wait. And the Sun Belt reacting and saying, look, if this waiver is granted, we will put you in the Sun Belt title game, which would make certainly some other teams unhappy. Wouldn't you think, Phil? Kind of moving the goalposts on the fly?
Well, Kyle, who in their right mind would say James Madison doesn't belong to be in a bowl game? I mean, they've absolutely dominated this season. I think if they go and appeal once again to the committee's going to grant that baby.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope the right decision is made for JMU. Let's move to Saturday now. Huge one in Happy Valley between Michigan and Penn State. Talk about moving the goalposts and rules and dishing out punishments or rulings. I mean, the NCAA has their hands full, right? Seems to always be the case, and doesn't seem like a decision that is satisfactory to most parties is ever made. But there is football that will be played, and as it stands now at the time of recording, it looks like Jim Harbaugh is going to be the head coach. What we care about, though, is Michigan and their ability to cover the 4.5, as they are the favorite coming in. 45 is the total. A 3-7 matchup, 12 o'clock noon, big noon Saturday is going to be there. And Phil, the regular season officially begins. All the controversy that is swirling around Michigan, they're finally playing a legitimate team as they enter 9-0, playing a ranked team. Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti, again, we don't know what he's going to do with Jim Harbaugh, if anything. UM leads the all-time series 16-10. They've split their last 6, so they've been competitive here with the Nittany Lions. Number 1 rushing defense against the top-scoring offense. Phil, what do you think?
Let me start off with one of my pet peeves, and that is the whatever game you said, the Fox game always kicks off at about 12:15 or 12:10.
Yes.
And the same thing, they got that stupid ESPN pregame show. And I like to take a picture of my 9 TVs and post it on the thing and then put the phone down and just concentrate on football. I got to wait till about 12:10 till those games actually start, and I could get 9 or 12 games on the TV at that time. So just a little bit of a pet peeve on that. I had to get that off my chest. But as far as this matchup goes, I'm going to handicap it the exact same way I did the Penn State-Ohio State game. I think you have 2 elite defenses in this game. Penn State gets pressure on the quarterback, 38 sacks, among the nation's leaders in TFL, holding opponents to 102 yards per game below their season average. Michigan holding opponents to 105 yards per game below their season average. Outstanding. Can't run the ball on them. They can get after the quarterback. High percentage of sacks as well. You've got 2 offenses that, let's face it, if you go -2 in turnovers in this game, you're going to lose the game. Why take a lot of chances? I do think Michigan's got the more veteran quarterback, but Penn State's got that home field edge. So my best play here, much like it was for the Ohio State-Penn State game, under the total. I like under 45. I think it'll be – I'm from the Midwest. I like defensive football, as you know. I'm going to enjoy this game a lot. I think it'll be a low-scoring defensive struggle.
Right, I feel your pain, Phil, on these games kicking off late. Me and Hartzell, we do the Blitz every Saturday. We're on air at noon. We normally have to take a break at like 12:03 or 12:05 because none of the games have started yet. We're looking for a live play-by-play, and there's just none to be found until about 12:10, just like you said. Anyways, let's talk Tulane. The Green Wave, 8-1. They're undefeated in AAC play. They keep winning. They're going to grab a spot in the New Year's Six Bowl for a second straight year. They're at home this week. They're big favorite, 22.5 points. They're favored over Tulsa. Tulane did have to eke out a win last week on the road against ECU. Phil, you were all over that one. That was one of your top 3 plays. The Green Wave, their head coach, Willie Fritz, said this whole not winning by enough points thing is a good problem to have. It's not a good problem to have if we're trying to handicap a game. So maybe, I don't know, maybe Tulane by 21 this week. What do you like here, Phil?
Yeah, and I wrote in my newsletter Inside the Press Box. My wrap-up line for this was Tulane has not won an American Conference game by more than 12 points all year, but maybe this week they will. I think when you look at Tulsa, they had a couple of competitive weeks early on, but it seems like they were a thin team coming in. Anytime you get a new head coach, especially at a place like Tulsa, you don't have an overly deep squad, and they seem to be wearing down a little bit. Last week, they jumped out to a 17-0 lead against Charlotte, ended up losing the game outright. They got blown out by Smoove, blown out by Rice the 2 weeks prior, and Tulane's just the type of team that can dominate you. They can run the football. They stop the run. They would put the onus on the quarterback, Cardell Williams for Tulsa, or Braylon Braxton, whoever's in there for him. They've even used Roman Fuller. They've used Kirk Francis. They've gone 4 different quarterbacks at Tulsa, and that's not good when you're going to face Tulane on the road. So I think maybe this is the week Tulane actually gets that win by more than the margin. I'm going to lean with the Green Wave at home in this one.
We know if you're watching, if you're listening, you're a hardcore football fan, but if you want more information from Phil, go to philsteele.com. Learn more about Phil Steele Plus, valued at $99. Access to all the team pages. Again, data going back multiple decades. You even have information about inside the press box with game-by-game predictions each and every weekend. But Phil Steele Plus updated every Sunday morning. Bet smarter, not harder. Be more like Phil. And again, follow him on Twitter at PhilSteele042. Let's go to the Big Ten, Phil. Indiana at Illinois. Fighting Illini, 6.5, 7-point favorite in some places. 1-4 against the spread in their last 5, though, and 2-7 against the spread overall. 0-5 at home. Haven't covered a game at home. Indiana got their first Big Ten win, maybe surprisingly, against Wisconsin, 20-14. 74th meeting all time. Illini have won 45 of those. 12 o'clock game on the Big Ten Network.
Yeah, and this is one where I have to applaud Tom Allen and the job he's doing at Indiana. It's been easy for this team to quit, but look what they did at Penn State. They nearly upset the Nittany Lions on the road, and then last week beating Wisconsin. And there was nothing. They were outgained by 83 yards, but Indiana led that thing pretty much start to finish. I like the way Brennan Sorsby is playing QB for him, sitting 55%. But the best thing about him, 7 touchdown passes, only 1 interception. Now, last week was quite a win for Illinois against Minnesota. You go back to that game, Altmaier gets injured. They're down, I think they were down 6. Altmaier gets injured, and they have to bring John Paddock in. And John Paddock, if you're a MAC fan, you remember he was Ball State's starting quarterback last year. So he comes in, hasn't really played all year, hadn't played at all in the game. He's got a 4th and 14 at his own 6-yard line, and he completes the pass for a first down, takes the team downfield, they score a touchdown, and win 27-6. Now, the big news for me is Jerron Newton, their defensive lineman. He is excellent. Go back to the Wisconsin game 2 weeks ago. They're up by 2 scores in the 4th quarter. Newton gets out of the game for a targeting call, and after that, Wisconsin rallied for the win. Well, against Minnesota, the Gophers put up 191 yards in the first half against Illinois. He, of course, had to sit out the first half. Newton comes back in the second half. Minnesota had a grand total of 69 yards in the second half. Newton's here for the whole game. I think he'll be a first-team All-American. He's playing, he's NFL prospect, and that may just be the difference in the game. Spread-wise, I got this thing right at the number. I had Illinois by about 7. I find it tough to bet against either of these two teams.
All right, jumping to the ACC, Boston College, they've made their way onto this show the last few weeks. They've won 5 games in a row straight up. They've covered in 3 of the last 4. Got that road dog win last week at Syracuse. Now they come back home, and they're actually a home dog this week against Virginia Tech, who just got run off the field against Louisville. Virginia Tech's favored by, it's only 1.5, but still, the Hokies are 0-4 on the road this season. I was a little surprised to see them come into this one as a favorite, Phil.
Tripp, great minds think alike. Huh? I agree with you 100% there. I thought Boston College would be at least a 3-point favorite in this game just for the home edge alone. And as you pointed out, Tripp, you're looking at a Virginia Tech team that's, I mean, when you're at home, enter Sandman, Blacksburg, they're tough. When they're on the road this year, as Tripp pointed out, 0-4, and they're losing the games by 20 points per game. And on the road, they're minus 106 yards per game. At home, plus 135. Now, I like Kyron Jones. Since he's come in, he's added mobility to the quarterback position. He's got a 7-2 ratio, is playing well, but they're just not the same team on the road. And Boston College, if you go back and look at my offensive line right up for Boston College, I call them the most improved offensive line in the country. And I'll say this is the most improved offensive line in the country. Last year, they lost all 5 starters prior to the season and then got banged up during the year, ran the ball for 2.1 yards per carry and allowed 46 sacks. This year, practically everybody back, plus all those guys got experience behind them. Now they're rushing for 210 yards per game. They've allowed 9 sacks all year. They've also switched their quarterback. Thomas Castellanos is great to watch. I mean, this guy's a dangerous runner, leading the team in rushing with 760 yards. He's also an outstanding passer. He's hitting 58% with a 12-7 ratio. So this is a really good Boston College team. My only concern, last week they got down to like their number 4 running back at the end of the game because Robichuk got injured. If they can get better health at running back, they're in good shape. But I think the home edge, the fact that this Boston College team is just as good, maybe even better than Virginia Tech, I'm shocked they're the underdog. Take Boston College plus the points.
Phil, I want to get some Old Dominion at Liberty into everyone's veins. Why not? Flames are undefeated, favored by 13.5 at home. This is a 1 o'clock game on ESPN Plus Saturday. Flames, Caden Salter, really like him at quarterback. Nearly 2,000 yards passing, 23-3 touchdown interception ratio. He can also run, Phil. I mean, this is an exciting player. 664 yards rushing, 7 touchdowns. The over-under in this contest is 59.5. Liberty has gone over in 4 of 5 of their past games. So can the ODU offense slow down Liberty enough, and can they get within striking distance of almost a 2-touchdown spread on the road?
Yeah, those are great questions. And, at this time of year, what I find is teams that are unbeaten, I call it playing with unbeaten pressure. You want to keep that unbeaten record. Maybe you play a little bit tighter. What we see, and Liberty's not involved in the playoff rankings, which, once again, we're not going to talk playoff rankings here, but a lot of those teams that are in the rankings, you find that the players are pointing up and saying, if we do this, if we do that, look where they have them, and they're getting a little distracted, and that's why you see some upsets this time of year. But going back to Liberty, Caden Salter is what I label in the magazine as a VHT quarterback. He was actually one of the higher rated ones coming out of high school. He went to a Power 5 school, and now he's here. I know last year when I was talking to Liberty's head coach, he talked about the fact that, Hugh Freeze had talked about the fact that Caden Salter was a guy that he was really, really high on, just hadn't made it yet, and he's made it this year. 59%, 23-3 ratio, dangerous runner. And they've also got Quentin Cooley in the backfield, 961 yards. But the thing about Old Dominion, they're just scrappy as all get out. In fact, all their games are close. They have only lost one game this year by more than a touchdown. So when they do lose, they're always close. Whether it's Grant Wilson, whether it's Jack Shields at quarterback, somehow, some way, Ricky Ronnie is doing just a tremendous job here. He did it. Their bowl year, remember that year they started out? I think they had to win their final 5 games to get to a bowl, and they somehow did. This year, I had no expectations for a bowl, and yet they've got a 4-5 record. They're still alive in that respect, and they're a spread covering machine. So I like Liberty to win the game at home. They're the better team. But this, I just can't go against Old Dominion. They're a team that even went to play James Madison. You know how good James Madison is on the road? Only lost by 3 in that game. Coastal Carolina lose by 4. And that's a game Old Dominion led. I think Coastal Carolina's first lead came with 23 seconds left in the game. So I just can't go against Old Dominion. I'll take the points in this one.
All right, nothing this year has been very easy for Clemson. They looked great last week in spurts against Notre Dame, and still at the very end, it looked like they were going to find a way to just give it to the Irish. But this week, Tigers are favored by 2 touchdowns. They're back at home against Georgia Tech, and the Jackets just rolled last week in Charlottesville over Virginia. That game was a very tight line, expected to be a close game. Feels like Georgia Tech's got a lot of momentum here, but they haven't won in Death Valley since 2008.
Yeah, and I tell you what, watching Haynes King these last 3 weeks, this guy is a electric runner and a dangerous passer. And on the season, he's got a 22-10 ratio. He's just getting better by the week. He's, of course, a Texas A&M transfer. He was a VHT, one of the highest-rated quarterbacks coming out of high school. Georgia Tech surprised me last week. I like Virginia. And Georgia Tech, as you mentioned, and then as I did mention, Musket got injured on the 5th play of the game. Might have had something to do with it. Virginia led 7-0 early on, and then Georgia Tech just steamrolled them. Now, Georgia Tech had not put back-to-back wins together prior to last week. They finally did it, so they're getting over some humps there. And the job that Brent Key's doing is just amazing. But Clemson does have more talent. And I think we saw some momentum. And I like the Dabo Swinney's post-game comments, which was, if you're buying stock, buy stock in Clemson now, because the stock is low. They're at 5-4, but this team is on the rise. And once again, I mentioned it last week, and I'll mention it again this week. In their 4 losses, they have a 94-60 first down edge. So they are so much better than their record right now. I'm going to lean with Clemson. Dangerous going against Georgia Tech, but I am going to lean with Clemson this week.
Interesting, Phil. Moving along here during the high noon window, we've got a game. What is this? 12 o'clock local time in Mountain West time zone, 2 o'clock Eastern, number 21, Arizona. Favored by 10.5, 55 is the total at Colorado. It's on the Pac-12 network, if you can find it. All right, call up your local cable subscriber. Get it on the tube, because Jed Big Fish Okay, Jedd Fisch is with the light shining so brightly on him. He's going up against primetime. Arizona has won 3 straight games, 27-10 against UCLA last week. Colorado, 3 straight overall losses. They have covered though each of the past 2 weeks. But how about Arizona, Phil? Are my numbers right? 8-1-0 ATS. I mean, this team has been so good this year under Jedd Fisch, and the wins are now coming behind to at least back up the effort.
Yeah, Tripp brought up the 8-1 with UNLV earlier, and so those are accurate numbers. And the amazing thing is, I like a couple of comments that Jedd Fisch has given this year. Go back to when they took USC to the wire and lost by 2. He said, why are we 3 touchdown underdogs in these games? Look at the scores. I mean, Mississippi State was a 7-point loss, Washington a 7-point loss, USC a 2-point loss. Could easily have won those games, and they have just been a spread covering machine since then. And that was even losing Jaden DeLora, their starting quarterback. And once again, Fisch's comment after they lost DeLora, he got injured. He said, I feel just as comfortable with Noah Fifita at quarterback. And guess what? I'm skeptical at the time, but Fifita's come in and he's hit 76% with an 11-3 ratio. This is a team that can run the football. They're playing really good defense. They're holding opponents to 75 yards per game, below their average. Last year, they couldn't stop anybody on the ground. They gave up 5.6 yards per carry. When I talked to Coach Fisch post-spring, he said they brought in a ton of transfers, a lot of P5 transfers on the defensive line. They were going to be much better. I was skeptical, but no need to be. They're only allowing 3.3 yards per carry. Thing with Colorado, they're dangerous as a home dog. They tend to come back at home. The altitude's one advantage you have. You got cold weather, you got altitude in Colorado's advantage this week, and you got that back door wide open. I mean, this is a team that is scrappy down the stretch. They keep trying to score late in the game. So I'm not really looking one way or another here. Tough to go against Arizona. I think they're clearly a better team, but Colorado definitely has that backdoor potential, and they don't stop playing.
Yeah, Folsom Field, the scene for that one, 2 o'clock again. Number 21, Arizona. Talked about the wins for Jedd Fisch. Now they get a CFP ranking. And I know it's college football playoff ranking-free zone, Phil. But, however, the rewards that Arizona is able to reap, the benefits here from Jedd Fisch and what that program has been able to instill in their Wildcat players, it's good to see them pop off at number 21 this week in their CFP debut in the rankings. Tripp?
Yeah, if you don't have the Pac-12 network, you can just jump over to the CW. I mean, this is a great programming they've had here with Dawson's Creek, One Tree Hill, Live Golf, and now we've got a great game on Saturday right here in Winston-Salem. NC State on the road at Wake Forest. You ask people, Wake Forest is a very scrappy team, but they've lost 5 of their last 6. They're actually getting 2 points at home this week against NC State and Raleigh. That's been where all the drama has been this week. MJ Morris, after he goes 3-1 as a starter, he decides to sit out the rest of the year so he can redshirt for another year next year. So it's back to Brennan Armstrong for quarterback for the Pack. They haven't won in Winston-Salem in their last 3 trips, and this is really a rivalry game here, Phil. Who do you like in this one?
Yeah, and that's one in which the home team is absolutely dominated. You said the last 4 trips, the home team's actually 14-2 in this series. So I think there's a lot of good factors on the Wake Forest side here. First of all, NC State each of the last 2 weeks has had a hyped up home crowd. They've been the underdog at home, and they've pulled the upsets. You upset Clemson, a game they, by the way, got out first down 21-9, outgained by 162 yards. Typical Clemson, right? Well, last week against Miami, they're out first down 19-12. They're outgained 292-231. They come out with a 20-6 win. Peyton Wilson's interception return for a touchdown, huge. Peyton Wilson clearly going to be a first-team All-American, a linebacker this year. So you're coming off 2 huge home upsets, and now you're traveling on the road to a place you don't win. The home team dominates the series. And Wake Forest last week showed a lot. They outgained Duke 400-267. They had an 18-15 first down edge. They were the better team. They're desperate. They opened up 3-0, but now they're 4-5. They've got to get a win to get bowl eligible. Meanwhile, NC State became bowl eligible last week. So maybe a breath of, hey, we made it. And I got to like Wake Forest plus the points in this one. I think they pull the upset. I'm not going to call it an upset, but they pull the upset here and get the win and keep their bowl hopes alive.
3:30, a massive Pac-12 showdown. 18th ranked Utah at number 5, Washington. They call it the greatest setting up there at Husky Stadium. Washington is favored by 9.5. 51.5 is the total. Kyle Whittingham has a Pac-12 worst showing against Washington among all other league teams. He's just 2-7 against the Huskies. Both teams coming off of wins last week. Washington still undefeated, sitting at number 5 in the playoff rankings. With the pig farmer, Bryson Barnes, he had 4 touchdowns in that rout of Arizona State this past weekend. Toughest test, certainly for Michael Penix Jr. to this point, going up against Utah secondary. That's one of the best, Phil. Huskies defense still with major problems. You saw it on display in a game that went about as well as any of us knew it would, or in terms of it played out exactly how we thought it would in USC and Washington. For Utah, Phil, questions about Jaquindon Jackson off a 111-yard performance. He got banged up, had to leave that game against ASU. And Utah leads in time of possession nationally, but I don't know if they're going to be able to keep that Washington offense off the field enough to be able to cover the 9.5.
Yeah, that's going to be key. And, this game is not on my board. It won't be one of my top 20 plays this week because I could make a case for Utah. Utah is the perfect team to take on Washington. Strong defense, run the football, shrink the clock, take Washington's fast-paced offense out of its normal setting. And last week, the Washington USC game, I thought turned on one play, and that was before the half, 28-28 game. USC's got their serve. They got the ball. They got a chance to go down the field and take the lead, and they fumble, and Washington scores a touchdown right before the half, and all of a sudden Washington's up and gets the ball to open up the second half. I thought that was the key play of the game. With Utah, as I mentioned, they're the perfect team to match up here with the defense in the run game. And Kyle Whittingham is 14-3 against the spread as an away dog. So you got to love all that. However, if Washington gets out and gets the lead, this could turn into a Utah-Oregon type of game, 35-6. Utah doesn't have that catch-up capability. So maybe check out what the score is at half. If Washington's up by 2 scores, then I'd call for Washington to win by 24, 28 points. But if this game's close at the half, Utah could pull the upset. It's going to be an interesting game to watch. I'll throw this one since you asked the question, Kyle. Who you like in this game?
Ooh, I'm going to go with Washington. I think their defense is going to step up and back up Penix and help in a situation where, again, I think this is going to be the toughest test. Penix up against the Utah defense. This is a defense unlike any other they've seen. You can argue, Oregon earlier this year, a game that Oregon should have won, but I think the defense is going to make some adjustments necessary and play more like a CFP caliber type team that we expect at home. They'll have the advantage. Kyle Whittingham has struggled all time against Washington, not spread related. So give me UW to cover the 9.5.
All right, fair enough.
I think Utah used too much last week. Why they have to score so many points? I had the under in that game. I loved it too. Arizona State did their part, but
that under, man. What was the total in that game, Tripp?
It was like 40. It was really low. And
if they played again this week, I would bet the under.
Yeah, probably so. A week too late for me, though. Let's jump over to the SEC. Josh Heupel, he just does not like Missouri. In his first 2 years at Tennessee, here's the scores against Missouri: 62-24 and 66-24. So they're averaging 64 points a game against Missouri under Josh Heupel. The Tigers are no slouch either on offense with Schrader and Burden and Theo Weiss. The over's the play for me here, Phil. And I kind of like Tennessee too. Just it's hard to go against them with those numbers coming into this matchup. What's your angle on Tennessee and Missouri?
Yeah, I like what you said in the game, Tripp. That's pretty much the way I was leaning. I mean, when you look at Missouri, I think the situation favors Tennessee. Last week, Tennessee played Connecticut at the half. Right after the half is over, Joe Milton, a lot of the starters out of the game. They're well rested. Last week, they put up 750 yards. I like the way Tennessee went into Alabama and actually led that thing 20-7 at the half with a 273 to 133 yard edge. So going into Como, I don't think it's as tough as going into Alabama. And if you could handle going into Alabama, granted they lost that game, but still, I like what they did in the first half there. I do think Tennessee's the better team overall and well rested. Meanwhile, Missouri was thinking SEC East title last week. I mean, they gave Georgia a heck of a game. I have lost that play on Georgia against Missouri last week, and I gotta be honest, Missouri played much better than I thought they would. I thought Georgia would get that one by a couple of touchdowns. So they're off an exhausting effort. Now they come back home. They haven't played overwhelming at home this year. I mean, you look at some of the games, the Middle Tennessee game they struggled with. So I'm just going to lean with Tennessee to win this one on the road. The spread's negligible. It's about 1.5 or 2. And I like your take on the over as well, Tripp.
How low can you go? Rutgers is
Here we
favored
go.
by 1 on the road at Iowa, but nobody cares about a side here. It's all about the under, which has now dipped to 28 as of Thursday morning, early Thursday afternoon. And according to ESPN stats and information, if that total stands, it would be the lowest in a college football game since 2000. So Rutgers at Iowa, some more historical context for you. That under last week against Northwestern at Wrigley Field opened at 29.5, but it was bet up to, I believe, around 32, 31.5. Never a sweat. 10-7 was the final, with Iowa winning. 3 consecutive Iowa games, Phil, have gone under a total of 22. And the drama, here's the best part. The drama of if Brian Ferentz will be retained is behind us all because we know he's not. That was announced a couple of weeks ago. So I think for once and for all of America is united in this defensive futility.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, you got 2 outstanding. This teams mirror each other, okay? Both are defense, special teams, don't turn the ball over on offense. Gavin Wimsatt's a guy that hadn't had many turnover problems. He is up to 5 now. That critical turnover last week. I mean, they were outplaying Ohio State. They're up 9-7. They're deep in Ohio State territory. They've got a chance to really go up by 9 at that point. And the 95-yard interception return for a touchdown did him in. If you're betting the under here, though, the one thing I want to point out is last week Rutgers put up a season high against an Ohio State defense of 361 yards. It was 101 yards above where Ohio State normally allows. They can run the football. So if they could do that on Ohio State, they should be able to run the football on Iowa. Probably not to that standard, not on the road, because that was at home against Ohio State. And I think Iowa is going to be higher up for this game, more pumped for it than Ohio State was in that road game last week. I see the line as I saw Rutgers. I even saw one place that had Rutgers a 1-point favorite. If you give me Iowa as a home dog, I'm going to take it because somehow, some way, Kirk Ferentz going to find a way to win this football game. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game, as you would expect. But with the line under 3 now, I just think Iowa wins the football game, and you pretty much don't even have to worry about the number. So I like Iowa in this one to win the game.
Yeah, I'm seeing Rutgers favored by a point, so good call there. 6 games since 2000 have had a total less than 34. Iowa's been involved in 5 of them.
What was that game in 2000, do you know?
Oh, I don't have that information in front of me, but 6
enough.
games since 2000 have had a total less than 34. So that's as far back as some people were willing to go. I'm not willing to go any further. Tripp certainly, in his degenerate approach to life, certainly would love to.
Hey, that game could go to 7 overtimes and maybe still stay under 28 points. I think Vegas is just this is so weird this day and age, but 28 just seems high to me. If it was 18, I think I would lean the under. All right, back over
that statement that Tripp just made, Kyle. 28 seems high to me.
It really does.
First half total.
It's amazing.
All right, to the game. This was the best game for me growing up. Really, what kind of made me a Florida State fan. FSU and Miami, 3:30 kick in Tallahassee this week. Florida State favored by 14. They may be getting some pieces back. We still haven't heard anything official, but they need Keon Coleman and they need Johnny Wilson to play this week against Miami. They got through last week against Pitt. Jordan Travis still looked really good without the normal set of weapons that he has. And on the other side here, the quarterback for Miami doesn't look like a very confident guy right now. Van Dyke, he's had 5 interceptions over his last 2 starts against no touchdowns. That's not very good. The only hesitancy here for me is 14 is a lot to give up in a rivalry game like this, even when you're at home. What do you like here, Phil?
I thought I saw a bunch of 14.5s. Kyle, what are you showing on that?
I got 14.5 in a couple of places. 14. What's the latest you saw, Tripp?
14 is what I had when we started the show here.
Yeah, 14.5. I think that might be the latest. Yeah.
Well, I got a couple things working on me to take Miami plus the points here. First of all, shop around for that 14.5. That half point could be very valuable. But the underdog is 18-7 in this series. And the visitor is actually 6-1 against the spread. I think the visitor is something like 13-4, which is surprising with the home edges. But the visitor does extremely well. The dog does well. I like rivalry dogs, and this is a series where the rivalry dog has done extremely well. And then what I mentioned earlier, which was the playoff thing. Now I can't even tell you where Florida State is ranked in the playoffs because I pay absolutely zero attention to it. So I don't know if they're in the top 4 or out of the top 4. It doesn't matter. We're not talking about that on the show. But when teams are in the playoff ranking, they're always looking at, hey, what if, what this, and it sort of distracts them. And they're playing a little bit tight. Miami's not playing tight about anything. They've already lost 3 games. Their hopes and dreams are dashed. They can just play loose the rest of the year. Tyler Van Dyke has had 2 very poor games since he returned from an injury, an 0.5 ratio. I don't think he'll play that way here. I think he'll have a much better game. They do have one of the best offensive lines in the country, as does Florida State. They've got a really good defense. They're holding opponents to 68 yards per game below their season average. And in their loss to NC State, they had a 19-12 first down edge. They led North Carolina at the half. And, of course, they should have beat Georgia Tech had they taken a knee. So I like this Miami team. I think they're under the radar and keep this one a lot closer than expected.
Let's go to Razorback Stadium, SEC country. Auburn's trying to get bowl eligible. They waxed Vanderbilt a week ago. Arkansas got their first win ever in Gainesville. It was one of the top games of the day, too. Super entertaining in the noon window, in overtime, 39-36. So the favorite, I saw, Phil, in games featuring Auburn, the favorite has won 23 consecutive times. I don't know if you could check me on that at some point, but yeah, the money line could be the play here for one of these two teams. And bowl eligibility is still in play for Arkansas. Auburn, FIU, they finish with the Battle Line rivalry at home against Mizzou. That's 3 straight home games to conclude after seemingly they were away from Fayetteville for about 5 weeks at a time in the early third portion of the year. New offensive coordinator Kenny Guyton. I know Sam Pittman liked his game plan last week. Some things worked. They did a lot of what worked before, but they really leaned into, hey, KJ and Rocket Sanders. Let's just rely on those two. Still dealing with some injuries, but Arkansas is the home favorite. 2.5 is the current total. 48, 4 o'clock on SEC Network, Phil.
Yeah, and this one, I definitely like Arkansas for numerous reasons. First of all, the one thing Guyton really had in his favor was 100% Rocket Sanders last week. Rocket Sanders hasn't been Rocket Sanders all year. That was his first 100-yard game, and that was a big part of the offense, putting up 461 yards last week, 23 first downs. KJ Jefferson also looking healthier. You go back and look at their schedule, and you touched on it, Kyle. They had the most brutal schedule in the country, 4 games away from home against A&M, Ole Miss, Alabama, and LSU. That's just a brutal slate. And then what happened? They were all beat up from that, and they played really good. They only lost to Bama by 3. They lost to A&M in a close game, LSU by 3. And they come back home and they lose to Mississippi State because they were just too beat up, and it was basically a slugfest, 7-3, a snoozer there. But they had a bye. They got healthy. They got Rocket Sanders back, and they showed what they could do last week against Florida. You hit it right on the head as far as the bowl goes. Arkansas could still easily get to a bowl game. Beat Auburn, beat FIU, beat Missouri. You're in a bowl game, and that would salvage your season. Meanwhile, Auburn, I think their goal is to get to a bowl game this year. And when you look at the record, they've got 5 wins. They also have New Mexico State on deck. So this isn't a vital game for them. The other thing I like that's in Arkansas's favor here is that they play better at home. They're plus 84 yards per game, minus 93 yards per game on the road. Look at Auburn's 3 true road games. So I'm not going to count Vanderbilt because if you're an SEC fan, Auburn has the crowd, or the visitor has the crowd edge when Vanderbilt's at home. So that's not a true road game. But your true road games against California, 230 yards, against A&M, 200 yards, against LSU, 293 yards. They're averaging about 240 yards per game on the road in true road games. This will be a true road game. I like Arkansas minus the 2.5, and I think your stat about the favorite covering will happen here, especially with the spread just 2.5.
Awesome.
Phil, what's going on with Washington State? No team has fallen harder than these guys. 4-0 to start the season. They were ranked number 13. They've lost their last 5 straight. Tight line this weekend. They're on the road at Cal. Cal's favored by 1.5. The total at 59.5. that Wilcox defense we normally like hasn't been that good this year. They're giving up 37 points per game. Their only wins this season for Cal are North Texas, Idaho, and Arizona State. Hard for me to trust either team in this one, Phil. Do you have an angle here?
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. I think Washington State's on an 0-5 ATS run, as you mentioned.
Yep.
I'm looking at Phil Steele plus right now, and both teams have a lot of red. So, I mean, there's a lot to go against here. Cal, as you touched about, Wilcox in his last four games, they're giving up 63 yards per game above opponent's average, 510 yards per game. Washington State's giving up 446. Their offense has dropped off. I mean, only 7 points against Stanford at home. What the heck has happened to Cam Ward, who looked unstoppable after 4 games? He was even in some Heisman mention early on in the year. So this is one of those games where, Fernando Mendoza is taken over as the QB at Cal. I'd prefer not to pick either team, but I would have to favor Cal at home by 3, right? So slightest of leans to California. If they're only laying 1.5, Cal should be a 3-point favorite.
Phil, how about UAB winning a shootout over FAU 45-42 a week ago at home, Protective Stadium in Birmingham? Now they're on the road going up to Annapolis to take on Navy. UAB favored on the road by 2.5. 54 is the total, 3:30 on CBS Sports Network. 8 of 9 UAB games have gone over 54, and that's where the total is currently sitting. So bound to be points, but they're taking on a Navy team that's going to slow it down. So that gives me intrigue in playing the total. I can't trust Trent Dilfer and UAB to cover 2.5. I mean, this is like stay away from, right? But I did want to get your opinion on these two, because Jacob Zeno, this guy lit it up a week ago against FAU, 484 pass yards and 5 touchdowns.
Yeah, Zeno's having a great year. In fact, he's got 17 touchdowns, just 7 interceptions on the year. They got out to a lead on Florida Atlantic last week. FAU came back, took the lead. You thought, okay, FAU's going to win. UAB went right down and got it, and that had to give them a lot of confidence, picking up that 3rd win of the year. They do have an explosive offense. Now, last week, Navy went on the road to Temple. Temple got back their quarterback, E.J. Warner, and Ty Lavatai missed the game. I think Lavatai is going to return here. That'll be a plus. I think the thing I like best about this game is that when you look at UAB's head coach and look at UAB's defensive coordinator, neither one of these two guys has ever faced the option. So this is their first crack at the option. Generally, when teams do that, they struggle. So that would lean towards your over, Kyle, would be if Navy's offensive option put some points on the board, much more than they did against Air Force, a team that knows how to shut down the option. Charlotte, team with a really good defense. Or even Temple last week, a team that maybe Navy wasn't completely up for. It's at home. I like Navy plus the points. I think they should be favored in this game. And I would also lean with the over. I think that UAB's defense is going to struggle. UAB in conference play giving up 200 yards per game, over 200 yards per game rushing, 5.2 yards a carry.
Okay. All right, Western Kentucky. They're a 4-point favorite at home this weekend against New Mexico State. And the Hilltoppers can get bowl eligible with a win here, but the Aggies have won 5 in a row straight up. And Phil, I know you're not crazy about my Western Kentucky under picks here, but I promise one of these years I'm going to hit one, and I'm going to take it this week, because Western Kentucky's not a great over team this year. They're 5-5 right now, and New Mexico State, they're on a string right now. I know you like to at least play a streak. They're on a string of 4 unders in a row. So that's my play on this one. What do you like?
I like it. I like it a lot. In fact, may end up going with that as the play on this game. You've got quarterbacks. Austin Reed, 21-6 ratio. You got Diego Pavia. He's a linebacker type of dude that plays pretty good quarterback. He came on really at the end of last year, got them to a bowl game. He's got a 17-6 ratio. He's the team's leading rusher. But you pointed out they've had 5 straight low-scoring games. Jerry Kill, amazing, just an amazing job. I mean, I did not expect New Mexico State to be 6-3 right now. They are. I did not expect them to get to a bowl game last year. They did. Tough to go against him. But this is a game Western Kentucky's got to have. They were the preseason favorite to win CUSA, and now here they are just trying to get bowl eligible at 5-4 on the year. They need to pick up a win. I don't like the way that Western played against UTEP last week. I thought UTEP was a better team, top to bottom last week. 19-11 first down edge, 368 to 280 yard edge. Somehow Western Kentucky got that, but that was on the road. Now they're at home. I lean with Western, but I like your pick of the under. I think that makes a lot of sense in this one. So I'm going to use that as my official pick on the game.
All right, good. I'm telling you, it's going to hit one of these years. You just let me keep trying. All right, to the maybe the biggest game on the ticket Saturday. Number 9, Ole Miss on the road in Athens, taking on Georgia. Bulldogs favored by 11 here. Ole Miss landed right on the number last week, beating A&M by 3. They're 8-1 straight up, 6-2-1 against the spread. Like I said, they're getting 11 points on the road. I know we've got the rule here. We're not crazy about Georgia at home. I know we went against it last week. It didn't work out. One last note on this, though. The last team to beat Georgia at home was South Carolina in 2019. Will Muschamp was the head coach. He's now the defensive coordinator at Ole Miss. What do you like here? You think the Rebs have a chance?
Yeah, this is one where it's right at the number for me. For all the reasons that you mentioned, Tripp, Georgia's not a good home favorite. Georgia let me down last week against Missouri, and I think Ole Miss is a better team than Missouri. But Georgia's going to play their A game here. You know that. And when they play their A game, Florida, Kentucky, they're almost unbeatable. So it's a tough one for me to pick. The other thing in Georgia's favor, in games against ranked teams, Georgia is 27-15 against the spread. And in games against ranked teams, Ole Miss is 3-6 against the spread. So you've got a team that's more used to the big games in Georgia, but they're a poor home favorite. I'm staying away from this one completely, but I will be watching this game, so I think it will be one of the best games of the weekend.
Yep.
Back to the Big 12, West Virginia, number 17, Oklahoma. Revenge spot for the Sooners, as not only have they lost 2 games in a row, and now you're curious what they have to play for. There's a psychology aspect here, but they lost in Morgantown a year ago also, 23-20. West Virginia, though, Phil, just 1-7 straight up, 2-5 against the spread all time in Norman. Their only win coming in 1982. Your College Football Preview magazine illustrates that data. A lot of points for an OU team to be favored here, considering, again, the mindset of not being CFP eligible, if you will, suffering their second loss, favored by 13. 58 is the total, 7 o'clock on Fox. Final installment of Bedlam, too, not to mention, it was their bitter in-state rival who dished them that second loss last week. So you really wonder how OU is going to respond Saturday night.
Yeah, and I do a weekly show in West Virginia, so I've been following West Virginia closely, and I've had a pretty good record in the West Virginia games. I picked them against Pitt. I picked West Virginia against Texas Tech. I picked West Virginia against TCU. I picked West Virginia against Houston at Hail Mary at the end of the game. I had Oklahoma State over West Virginia. Then I had West Virginia over UCF and BYU. So pretty good record in their games. This week I'm actually going with Oklahoma at home for a couple of reasons. You talked about Oklahoma being disappointed. And I think for most big teams that lose that second game, there is a lot of disappointment level. However, last year, Oklahoma was just 6-7. So I think coming into the year, there wasn't a firm belief that we are a top 5 team coming in. I think after the Texas game, they started to think that way. Maybe that's a little bit problem with what they've had the last 3 games, all ATS losses. But now they're off a loss. They're at home. They need a win. They're playing with revenge. I like how potent their offense is. And with West Virginia, they need to be able to run the football. I think Oklahoma can slow down the run and put the onus on Garrett Green. Playing with legitimate revenge at home, off 2 losses. I actually like Oklahoma minus the points in this game.
Let's stay in the Big 12. Last week, it looked like Texas was on its way to just routing Kansas State, and they end up having to hang on to win that game. It was one of the best games of the week last weekend. This week, 7th-ranked Longhorns head to Fort Worth. They're a 10-point favorite over TCU. Quinn Ewers listed still is day-to-day. He's getting closer. On the other side, Josh Hoover, they found a little something in the second half last week against Texas Tech. He ended up with over 350 yards. Not sure if we're going to see him. I know they're saying they're closer to getting Morris back at quarterback at TCU. But at 10 points, if Quinn Ewers plays, that feels a little cheap to me against a TCU team that's not been very consistent this season.
Yeah, TCU's consistency has been a factor. I remember that game against SMU at home. I had SMU in a game, and TCU looked pretty good there.
Yep.
And as we know, SMU's playing really well. And the BYU game, that was not even a question. But you go back and take a look at these last 2 weeks, they haven't been overwhelming. I do like Josh Hoover. I've mentioned it on this show before that when I Talked to Coach Dykes going over the quarterback situation. He liked Hoover, so I think he'd be fine. I do expect Quinn Ewers to play this week, which would be a big plus for Texas. Probably if the line's 10, you got to expect that number goes up. So go ahead and grab it right now at 10 if you can. I actually had the game around 10 in that area. As you mentioned, the Kansas State game, you're thinking this game is going to be an absolute blowout. What was it, 24 to 23 to 7? And then all of a sudden, back-to-back turnovers, back-to-back touchdowns, and all of a sudden you got a game. It's a Texas team that really impresses me talent-wise. Offensive line, running back, receiver, quarterback, defense, special teams, they are a complete team. And TCU's at, here's a question for you, Tripp. In the last 9 games in this series, what's the record? Texas, TCU, straight up, not ATS.
Straight up, I know TCU got them last year. Let's see here.
6-3 TCU, 7-2.
7-2 TCU. There you go. So that's which is surprising to I think anybody that TCU's won 7 of the last 9 meetings.
8-3 straight up and ATS, as your magazine says, and 8 of those have gone under too.
And last year's game was a pure under game. Remember, at the half it was 3-0. You had the yards 72 to 68. I think there was 5 first downs in the first half, maybe 4.
Yeah.
So that was quite an under game. So lean with the under, and I find a tough time picking either one of these. But Gary Patterson's no longer the head coach at TCU, so a lot of that dominance that TCU had might be gone.
All right, a couple more before we go chasing, and then it's full Bears-Panthers mode for each of your boys here, Phil, because we're getting closer to 8:15. Don't worry, Southern Miss will be on. Louisville will be on the tube as well. Certainly LSU will be on one of my screens when I'm in studio Saturday night. LSU, 9th-ranked Tigers, off a loss at Alabama, hosting Florida, and favored by 2 touchdowns. 63 is the total. SEC Network game, as mentioned. Another game measuring the psychology of each team here. Florida losing the way that they had at home to Arkansas. LSU now out of the CFP picture after picking up their 3rd loss. Florida's lost 5 of 6 in Baton Rouge. And Phil, the health of Jaden Daniels is the other major question mark after taking a hit to the head and going through the concussion protocols. Brian Kelly believes he's got 2 capable quarterbacks in Daniels and Garrett Nussmeier.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think if Jaden Daniels does play, which I think he will, I don't know if he runs as much as he did last week. Maybe more of a precaution. I think he had a run against Alabama. And generally, if you have a running quarterback like that, you want to be cautious. But in the big game, go ahead and push them all in. And that's what we saw with Daniels. Made some incredible runs last week. The underdog's done well in this series. I believe the underdog's 6-1 straight up in ATS. I think Florida has their opportunity to stay in this game with LSU. Tough going against that LSU offense. I would lean with the over, but I also do like Florida plus the points. I think they can keep this one closer than expected, especially with Jaden Daniels maybe not taking as many runs as he normally does. So I think we're going to see a good psyche for Florida, questionable psyche for LSU.
All right, battle for the victory bell in Chapel Hill on Saturday night, 8:00 kick between Duke and North Carolina. Duke may have to turn back to Grayson Loftus again because I think it's still pretty questionable if Riley Leonard or their normal backup. I think they're going to be on the shelf this week. Bellin. Devils do still have a good defense, though, and 14.5. This is another one of those rivalry games. It's hard for me to make a pick on this one, Phil. Is there an angle you like here?
Yeah, I do like North Carolina. With Duke, I used inside the press box selection on Florida State over them, and while it was close at the half, when Leonard went out, it was 38-20. I used an inside the press box selection on Louisville over Duke, and that wasn't even much of a game, 23-0. North Carolina can be disappointing as a double-digit favorite, as we learned against both Virginia and Georgia Tech, but they're coming off an easy game against Campbell. It's Grayson Loftus against Drake May. So you've got a freshman quarterback, first road start versus NFL caliber quarterback. I think when you look at Duke's defense, they haven't given up a lot of points, but they have given up the yards this year. Given up, in the big games, they've averaged about 400 yards per game to given up. I think North Carolina will be able to get this one at home. I like the Tar Heels minus the points.
All right, let's go chasing. Phil, 10:30 kick, USC on the road at 6th-ranked Oregon. Now at 10:30 p.m. Eastern time, I will have been home for about 3.5 hours, so I'm about 9 beers deep here. If I've had a bad day with my picks, I did a little math. You may you may think I've been drinking when I do this math here. USC, they're averaging 45 points a game. So Oregon's going to need to cover about 60, or they're going to need to score about 60 if they want to cover in this game. But if there's ever been a team that you want to see when you need to score 60 points, it's the Trojans right now. Who do you like in this one?
Yeah, and I do on Phil Steele Plus, I've got what I call the AGG, or the average game grade. And what that does is no starting point. It only takes into account the scores of the games, the yards rushing, yards passing, both offense and defense, who your opponent was. And all that's added in and comes up with the score. The number one team in the country right now is the Oregon Ducks. And they may be the most complete team in the country. They can run the football with Irving and James and Whittington. They've got one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And maybe he's actually my pick right now. If you said right now to me, who's going to win the Heisman, I'm going to say Bo Nix wins the Heisman, because he's hitting 78%. He's got a 25-2 ratio. They will get the chance to get revenge against Washington in the Pac-12 title game if Washington stays undefeated. And I think they do. And right now, the Vegas power ratings I have up on philsteele.com have Oregon a 5-point favorite over Washington if they meet on neutral field. So Vegas thinks Oregon's the best team. I think Oregon's the best team. And they've got a defense. They're holding opponents to 84 yards per game below their season average, number 12 in the country. USC has just had all their dreams shattered. I mean, 3 losses, a devastating defeat last week. You have no defense. And here's an interesting thing. Caleb Williams, when he takes on top 25 defenses, is hitting like 51% with a 6-6 ratio and only throwing for like 189 yards per game. This is a top 25 defense. So add it all up. Autzen Stadium, explosive offense, USC defense. Caleb Williams struggles against top Ds. I like the Ducks big in this one.
Speaking of Phil Steele Plus, don't forget about the Phil Steele Plus Tour. For those watching, for those listening, get on Twitter, on X, at PhilSteele042. Find that this weekend ahead of all the Saturday action for Week 11. Phil will show you how it's done. Bet smarter, not harder. Be more like Phil with Phil Steele Plus and that YouTube Tour. Final one. Then I got a question. Which road fave might most likely cover of the other really late games, Phil? But Arizona State and UCLA, both teams coming off losses. The rout for the Sun Devils at the hands of Utah, and UCLA losing to Arizona. Bruins favored by 18.5. 44.5 is the total. 9 o'clock Eastern, Pac-12 Network. Last time in Pasadena, Phil, unranked Sun Devil squad upset the Bruins. 5 outright upsets in this series since 2015.
Yeah, I think my favorite play in this one is the under. UCLA's got a heck of a defense. Holding opponents 93 yards per game below the season average. Not quite sure what happened to Arizona State's defense last week. I think on field quite a bit, with Arizona State only producing 7 first downs with that banged up offensive line. Probably had something to do with it. But I think the under. What do you got for a total on this game?
Total, I've got 44.5.
Yeah, I'm going to go with under in this one. Playing on what Tripp had last week, I think that when you look at Arizona State, they're a defensive squad with a banged-up offensive line. UCLA, we don't know who their quarterback is. Colin Schlee was in the game late in the game. I think he was 0 for 5 passing against Arizona last week after an injuries to Garbers and more. So I definitely like the under as my best play in that one.
Yeah, and it might have ticked down another point, 43.5. San Jose State is now favored in what was a coin flip game with Fresno. I'm not going to ask you about that one, but Iowa State is a road favorite, as is Air Force coming off a loss, Phil. Which is maybe more likely to cover? Both. We'll take Fresno State, San Jose State out of the equation, but Cyclones are playing at BYU, 2-0 all-time in Provo, favored by a touchdown and a hook, and then Air Force laying 19 at Hawaii late on Saturday night.
Yeah, if there's one team not going to be bothered about a trip to Hawaii, it's Air Force. They're in the military. They're disciplined. I think they're capable of handling that number, so I would lean with Air Force in that one. And with Iowa State and BYU, what the heck? You got 2 5-4 teams, and one of them's a 7.5-point favorite. Vegas knows something here. Iowa State's a much better team, better defense. BYU, Keaton Slovis lost his job to Retzlaff last week against West Virginia. They can't run the ball. They're struggling on the defense. And Iowa State's handled 2 road games as a big favorite, or 2 road games where they've won by more than 7. That would be the Cincinnati game and then the Baylor game. I think they're capable of handling Provo here. I like Iowa State minus points there.
It's awesome, though. It's the most action we've had late in quite some time that I can recall. 5 games starting at 10 o'clock Eastern time. or later here for Week 11. Then Arizona State, UCLA is at 9, right on the heels of the Tar Heels and Duke in Chapel Hill. All right, Phil, your power plays, you're 11-4 over the last 5 weeks. I've got copious amount of notes that I've taken. I've got 5-6 games I could throw out at you, but I know we're all most interested in the 3 that you're going to provide us here for the Week 11 edition of the Phil Steele Show. What do you like?
And usually what I do during the show, guys, I pick a couple in advance, and then I'm like, oh, which one did I get most fired up during the show? And I throw that one in. I got Boston College, plus the points at home over Virginia Tech. I think the wrong team's favored there. I got under in Penn State and Michigan. I will use the under in the Penn State-Ohio State game. And I just got all fired up about Oregon. I'm going to calm down a little bit here, but I like the Ducks minus the points there.
Oh, I love it. The Penn State-Michigan game under, yeah, you definitely talked me into that. But my 3 that I am most high on, Oklahoma, minus the 13 at home against West Virginia. Arkansas, more to gain versus Auburn. Still with a gimme later on the schedule in the next couple of weeks. So Arkansas covering as a home fave, 2.5 against the Tigers. And no respect for Duke, Phil, including you. I am taking the Blue Devils.
Go.
I'm going back to the well. Love my Dukies. 14.5. I mean, come on now. This is a rivalry game. I don't care if it's Beelan. I don't care if it's Loftus. I don't care if it's Kyle Schassburger. I don't care if it's Tyson Bagent, okay? It can be any one of the – Tommy DeVito, whoever it is you have under center. That defense will travel 8 miles down the road, Tobacco Road, and the victory bell belongs to Duke this weekend. Tripp, anything?
I love the enthusiasm, man.
Tripp,
really
are you giving me the Bears minus 3 tonight? Come on, that's the only thing we still need.
Yeah, the Bears are going to take care of business.
Yeah.
I mean, how many games have we lost now? What, 7?
All but 2.
10-7. Still very much in play here. The one game I'll go against, Phil, I'm going to lean just a little bit with Georgia Tech. If you can get that hook, that's another one where I think the hook might come into play, like 28-14 Clemson wins and Georgia Tech can cover by half a point. The other one that I really like, I think Michigan is just kind of licking their chops for a chance. Everybody's talked about their schedule all year. This is a chance for them to show up and prove that, like, hey, we are the real deal. Let us show you. So I'm rolling with Michigan this week.
Nice.
Sick pick on the way out, too. Missed this couple of weeks. Sam Houston State did get their first win a couple of weeks or last week ago, finally, over Kennesaw State. But not an FBS win. They will get that against Louisiana Tech team that's lost 4 in a row. 7.5. They are the underdogs. They're catching on the road, 3 o'clock, ESPN+. First FBS win will come for Sam Houston State. Maybe the most unlucky team in America to this point. Phil, I know the magazine process, we're getting deep into the dark, dirty work of this come Thanksgiving time, so you're as busy as ever in trying to forecast and put together now next year's magazine, aren't you? So please take care of yourself this weekend. People follow him at Phil Steele 042 on Twitter. Phil, another fun Week 11 edition of the Phil Steele Show.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And, I'm on every award committee as well. So it's award time. I'm not only trying to keep track of the 65 games that are going on each weekend, but dealing with all the awards, being in the inside committees on all of them. So it is rather hectic, but only 3 weeks left in the season. We'll see how it finishes out.
Tripp, continue to be beautiful, sir. We'll talk to you and Phil next week for Week 12. It's been a pleasure. Follow us on the Varsity channel on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, all that good stuff. More information at philsteele.com. He's Phil Steele, the unicorn at PhilSteele042. I'm at Kyle Schass. At Tripp Hurd, he is the Lock Doctor. Again, bet smarter, not harder. Be more like Phil on the Phil Steele Show.